The words hit like a slap. There's not enough space for you, Ellie. My parents stood there, their faces a mix of guilt and resolve, as if they'd rehearsed this moment. I was 16, staring at the packed suitcases for their exclusive family retreat, and they were leaving me behind, again. It was a humid July morning, the kind where the air clings to your skin like a bad memory. We were in the driveway of our suburban Chicago home, the minivan idling, ready to whisk them off to some idyllic Wisconsin campground. Mom clutched her thermos, avoiding my eyes, while Dad shuffled his feet, muttering about limited spots and adult priorities. I'd heard it all before. Every summer, every family event, I was the afterthought, the kid who didn't fit into their perfect picture. But this time, something in me snapped. I wasn't just going to sulk in my room and wait for their half-hearted apologies when they returned. No, I was going to make them feel the weight of their choice. I forced a smile, the kind that hides a storm. Fine, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Have fun. Mom's shoulders relaxed, thinking I'd accepted it, but Dad's eyes lingered, sensing the shift in me. They drove off, the van's taillights fading into the morning haze, and I stood there, plotting. I wasn't just Ellie, the forgotten daughter. I was Ellie, the girl who'd turned their regret into a story they'd never forget. By noon, I was on my phone, scrolling through local community boards. The retreat they were attending, some upscale, family bonding camp called Pine Haven, had a teen volunteer program I'd overheard Mom mention weeks ago. It was for kids whose families were attending, but I wasn't about to let a technicality stop me. I called the camp office, my voice all sugar and confidence. Hi, I'm Ellie Harper. My parents are registered for the retreat, but I wasn't able to join them. I'd love to volunteer instead, contribute to the community, you know? The coordinator, a cheerful woman named Ms. Clara, didn't even hesitate. We'd love to have you. Can you be here by tomorrow? I packed light, a backpack with clothes, my journal, and a cheap bus ticket to Wisconsin. The ride up was bumpy, the bus smelling faintly of stale coffee and regret, but I felt alive. For once, I wasn't waiting for permission to exist in my own family's world. I was crashing it. Pine Haven was everything the brochures promised. Sprawling green fields, cabins nestled among towering pines, and a lake that shimmered like it was trying to outdo the sun. When I arrived, Miss Clara greeted me with a warm hug, her gray curls bouncing as she handed me a volunteer badge. You're with the teen crew, she said. They're a lively bunch, but you'll fit right in. I nodded, scanning the crowd for my parents. They were here somewhere, probably laughing over campfire s'mores, oblivious to the fact that their space issue was about to become my stage. The teen volunteers were a mix of misfits and overachievers, all around my age, and they welcomed me like I was one of their own. There was Marcus, a lanky kid with a quick grin and a knack for storytelling, and Priya, a sharp-eyed girl who could organize chaos like it was her job. They filled me in on the retreat's schedule, team-building games, talent shows, and a big family showcase at the end. That's when it hit me, the showcase. It was the perfect opportunity to show my parents what they'd missed by sidelining me. That night, I lay in my bunk, the cabin filled with the soft snores of my new friends. I couldn't sleep, not with the fire in my chest. I'd spent years being the quiet one, the one who didn't make waves. But here, in this place they thought they could exclude me from, I was going to make waves so big they'd drown in them. The next morning, I threw myself into the volunteer work. We set up activity stations, hauled supplies, and ran errands for the camp staff. I kept my eyes peeled for Mom and Dad, but they were tucked away in the adult-only sessions, probably bonding with other parents who didn't have to deal with their kid crashing the party. Fine by me. It gave me time to plan. Marcus noticed my intensity during lunch as I scribbled ideas in my journal. What's the deal, Ellie? He asked, stealing a fry from my plate. You look like you're planning a heist. I grinned, leaning in. Not a heist. A takeover. My parents ditched me for this retreat, said there wasn't enough space. I'm going to make sure they see me everywhere. His eyes lit up. Oh, I'm in. What's the plan? The plan was simple but bold. I'd join the teen talent show, not as a volunteer helper, but as a performer. I'd write and perform a spoken word piece about what it felt like to be invisible in your own family. It would be raw, real, and impossible to ignore. Priya overheard and jumped in, offering to choreograph a group act to back me up. "We'll make it epic," she said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. By the end of the day, half the teen crew was involved, brainstorming ways to amplify my performance. As the sun set, painting the lake in hues of orange and pink, I felt a flicker of doubt. What if this backfired? What if they didn't care? But then I remembered Mom's quick glance away, Dad's half-hearted excuse, and the years of being pushed to the sidelines. No, they'd care. I'd make them. The talent show was 3 days away, and I spent every spare moment writing. My journal filled with lines about feeling like a ghost in my own home, about the ache of wanting to belong. The words poured out, sharp and heavy, each one a piece of the hurt I'd carried too long. The teen crew became my family in those moments, helping me refine the piece, suggesting music, and even designing a simple stage setup. They didn't know my parents, but they knew what it was like to feel overlooked, and that was enough. By the second night, I finally spotted Mom and Dad at the campfire social. They were laughing with another couple, oblivious to me watching from the shadows. My heart twisted, but I didn't approach them. Not yet. I wanted them to see me on my terms, in the spotlight, where they couldn't look away. The days blurred into a frenzy of preparation. I rehearsed until my voice was hoarse, the words etched into my soul. The teen crew rallied around me, their energy infectious. We were a team, a force, and I was their voice. When the talent show night arrived, my nerves were electric, but I was ready. This was my moment. They'd left me out, but I was about to show them there was more than enough space for me. The talent show was held in Pine Haven's main pavilion, a rustic wooden structure strung with fairy lights that glowed like fireflies against the night sky. The air buzzed with anticipation as families filled the benches, their chatter a low hum beneath the creak of the stage. I stood backstage, my hands trembling, clutching the crumpled pages of my poem. Marcus gave me a thumbs up from the sound booth, where he was cueing the music, while Priya adjusted the makeshift props, a few painted backdrops we'd thrown together to set the mood. My heart pounded, but it wasn't just nerves. It was power, the kind that comes from knowing you're about to change everything. I hadn't told my parents I was here. They thought I was back in Chicago, probably watching TV or sulking in my room. The thought of their faces when they saw me on that stage fueled me. I'd spent years swallowing my hurt, nodding along to their excuses, but tonight, I was done being invisible. My poem, Enough Space, was a raw, unfiltered cry from the part of me they'd ignored. It wasn't just for them. It was for every kid in the audience who'd ever felt pushed aside, for every volunteer who'd shared their own stories with me over the past few days. The show started with a bang, a group of younger kids doing a chaotic but adorable dance routine, followed by a dad who butchered a guitar solo but got cheers for effort. Then it was our turn. Priya's choreography had the teen crew moving in sync behind me, their steps soft but deliberate, like a heartbeat. The music started low, a haunting piano melody that Marcus had found online, and I stepped into the spotlight. The light was blinding, but I could feel the audience's eyes on me. Somewhere out there, Mom and Dad were watching, probably confused, maybe even annoyed. Good. I wanted them to feel something. I took a deep breath and began. "There's not enough space," you said, your words a knife in the quiet. "Not enough room for the girl who's been shrinking to fit your world. I've been folding myself smaller, tucking away dreams, silencing screams, just to make space for your peace." My voice shook at first, but it grew stronger with every line. The teen crew moved behind me, their shadows dancing across the backdrop, amplifying the weight of my words. I spoke of the birthdays where I was an afterthought, the family dinners where my chair felt like a loner, the way their love always seemed to come with conditions. The audience was silent, the kind of silence that means they're really listening. I didn't dare look for my parents. I didn't need to. I could feel their shock like a current in the air. Halfway through, I hit the lines I'd written in a fury, the ones that cut deepest. "You built a world where I'm the ghost, haunting the edges of your laughter. But I'm done fading. I'm here, taking up space, and you'll see me now." The teen crew stomped in unison, a thunderous beat that made the stage tremble. A few people in the audience gasped, and I heard a soft sob. Maybe from a kid, maybe from a parent. It didn't matter. I was saying what needed to be said. When I finished, the final note of the music hung in the air, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the pavilion erupted. The teen volunteers rushed forward, hugging me, their cheers drowning out the applause. I was shaking, tears burning my eyes, but I felt alive, like I'd finally claimed the space I'd been denied. As I stepped off the stage, I saw them, Mom and Dad, standing near the back, their faces pale, eyes wide. Mom's hand was over her mouth, and Dad looked like he'd been punched. They didn't move, didn't wave, just stared. I held their gaze for a second, then turned away, joining my crew as they hooped and high-fived. They'd seen me. They'd heard me. And they weren't going to forget it. Backstage, Miss Clara pulled me aside, her eyes shining. "Ellie, that was incredible. You've got a gift." I thanked her, but my mind was elsewhere. The performance was only the beginning. I'd planted a seed, and I wasn't done yet. The retreat still had 2 days left, and I was going to make sure my parents couldn't ignore me or what I'd said. The next morning, the camp buzzed with talk about the talent show. Kids I didn't know came up to me, saying they'd felt my words, that they'd been invisible too. One girl, maybe 13, hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for saying it." It hit me then. This wasn't just about me anymore. I'd started something bigger. My parents finally approached me at breakfast, their faces a mix of guilt and defensiveness. "Ellie, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" Mom asked, her voice tight. Dad just stood there, looking at his coffee like it held the answers. I shrugged, keeping my tone light but sharp. "You said there wasn't space. I made my own." They didn't know what to say to that, and I didn't give them the chance. I walked away, joining Marcus and Priya at a table with the other volunteers. The rest of the day, I could feel their eyes on me during activities. They joined a team-building game I was helping run, and I made a point of being professional, smiling, giving instructions, but keeping my distance. They wanted to talk, I could tell, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I had one more move to make, something to cement this moment, to make sure they'd never forget what it felt like to push me away. That night, the volunteers were tasked with organizing a family reflection session where families wrote letters to each other about what they'd learned at the retreat. I volunteered to lead it, knowing it would force my parents to confront their choices. I wasn't just playing the game anymore. I was rewriting the rules. The family reflection session was held in a quiet clearing by the lake, the kind of place that felt sacred under the starlit sky. Lanterns cast a soft glow on the circle of families sitting cross-legged on blankets, their faces a mix of exhaustion and hope after days of bonding activities. I stood at the center, holding a stack of blank note cards and pens, my volunteer badge pinned proudly to my shirt. The team crew flanked me, their presence a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. My parents sat near the back, their postures stiff, like they knew something was coming but weren't sure what. I cleared my throat, my voice carrying over the gentle lapping of the lake. "Tonight, we're writing letters to someone in our family. Something honest, something real. Something you might not have had the courage to say out loud before." I paused, letting the words sink in. This is about taking up space, about being heard. I didn't look at Mom and Dad, but I could feel their tension, like a taut string ready to snap. The idea had come to me after the talent show, when I realized my poem had done more than shock them. It had cracked open a door. Now, I was going to push it wide open. I handed out the note cards, moving through the crowd with purpose, and when I reached my parents, I gave them a small smile. Not warm, not cold, just enough to keep them guessing. Mom took her card with trembling hands, and Dad's jaw tightened as he met my eyes. They knew this was my domain now. As the families wrote, the clearing was quiet except for the scratch of pens and the occasional sniffle. I wrote my own letter, sitting with the teen crew, my words flowing as easily as they had in my poem. I didn't hold back. I wrote about the years of feeling like an extra in their lives, about the pain of being told I didn't belong, about how I'd found my own space here at Pine Haven. But I also wrote about hope, about wanting a family that saw me, not just when I forced them to. When it was time to share, I asked for volunteers. A few families went first, a dad apologizing to his son for working too much, a sister promising to listen more. The air grew heavy with emotion, and I could see my parents shifting uncomfortably, their note cards still in their laps. Then I stepped forward. "I'll go," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. I held up my card, facing the crowd but speaking to them. "This is to my parents. You told me there wasn't enough space for me here, but I came anyway. I've spent years trying to fit into your world, but I'm done shrinking. I want you to see me, not just when I'm on a stage, but every day. I want a family where there's always space for me." My voice cracked on the last line, and I let it. Let them hear the hurt. Let them feel it. The clearing was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. Then Priya squeezed my hand, and Marcus gave a low whistle, breaking the tension. A few people clapped, softly at first, then louder. I looked at my parents. Mom was crying. Her note card crumpled in her fist. Dad's face was unreadable, but his eyes were wet. They didn't stand up to share their letters, and I didn't expect them to. Not yet. After the session, families lingered, hugging and talking in low voices. I stayed with the volunteers, helping clean up, but I could feel my parents hovering nearby. Finally, they approached, their steps hesitant. "Ellie," Mom started, her voice thick. We didn't realize how much this hurt you." Dad nodded, his hands shoved in his pockets. "We should have brought you. We messed up." It was an apology, but it felt small compared to the years of neglect. I wanted to believe them, but trust isn't rebuilt in a single night. "I'm glad you see it now," I said, my tone even. "But this isn't just about the retreat. It's about every time you made me feel like I didn't matter." They flinched, and I let them. I wasn't here to make them feel better. I was here to be heard. The next morning, the final day of the retreat, was the family showcase, where each family presented something they'd created together: a skit, a song, a craft. The teen crew was tasked with helping families prepare, and I threw myself into it, partly to avoid my parents, partly to keep the momentum going. They tried to talk to me again during breakfast, but I kept it short, focusing on my work. I wasn't ready to let them back in, not until they showed me they meant it. By afternoon, I noticed a change. Mom and Dad were more present, joining activities with the other families, but they kept glancing at me, like they were trying to figure out how to fix this. I didn't make it easy for them. I laughed with Marcus and Priya, led games with confidence, and made sure every kid I worked with felt seen. It was my way of showing them what I could do when I wasn't pushed aside. For the showcase, my parents surprised me. They'd put together a simple skit about a family learning to listen to each other, with Dad playing a bumbling dad who keeps missing the point and Mom as the mom who finally gets it. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and when they looked at me during their performance, I knew it was their way of saying they were trying. The crowd laughed and clapped, and I felt a flicker of warmth, but I wasn't ready to forgive just yet. As the showcase ended, Ms. Clara announced a surprise. The teen volunteers were getting an award for their hard work. She called us up, and the crowd roared as we accepted a handmade plaque. I held it high, grinning at my crew, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. My parents were in the audience, clapping, their faces a mix of pride and regret. I met their eyes, and for a moment, I saw something new: respect. The retreat was ending, but this wasn't the end of my story. I'd made my point, but the real work was just beginning. They'd regret leaving me out, not because I'd hurt them, but because I'd shown them what I was capable of, and I wasn't done yet. The final night at Pine Haven was a blur of campfire songs and tearful goodbyes. The air was thick with the scent of pine and roasted marshmallows, and the teen crew gathered by the lake, swapping stories and promising to stay in touch. I sat on a log, my volunteer badge still pinned to my jacket, feeling the weight of the past few days. I'd come here to make a point, but I'd found something more, a sense of self I hadn't known I had. My parents were nearby, packing up their cabin, but I kept my distance. They'd made their move with the skit, but I wasn't ready to close the gap just yet. Marcus plopped down beside me, tossing a pebble into the water. "You shook things up, Ellie," he said, grinning. "Your parents looked like they saw a ghost during your poem." I laughed, but it was bittersweet. "Yeah, well, they needed to." Priya joined us, her eyes soft. "You gave a lot of us courage, you know. That girl who hugged you? She's been texting me about starting a poetry club at her school." My chest warmed at that. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every kid who'd ever felt like they didn't fit. As the fire crackled, Miss Clara approached, her smile warm but serious. "Ellie, your parents asked to speak with you before they leave tomorrow. They're in the main lodge." She paused, studying my face. "You don't have to go, but I think they're trying." I nodded, my throat tight. I wasn't sure what I wanted from them. An apology that felt real, a promise they'd keep, or maybe just to know they'd finally seen me. But I'd decide on my terms. I spent the rest of the night with the crew, laughing until my sides hurt, but my mind kept drifting to the lodge. When the campfire died down, I made my way there, the gravel crunching under my sneakers. The lodge was quiet, the fairy lights casting long shadows on the wooden walls. Mom and Dad were sitting at a table, their suitcases by their feet, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. Mom's eyes were red, and Dad's hands were clasped tightly, like he was holding himself together. "Ellie," Mom said, standing as I approached. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. "Okay, talk." My tone was cool, but inside, my heart was racing. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt heavy. Dad spoke first, his voice low. "We were wrong, Ellie. Not just about the retreat, but for a long time. We didn't see how much we were hurting you." He looked down, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. "We got caught up in our own stuff. Work, stress, trying to keep everything together. But that's no excuse." Mom nodded, tears spilling over. "Your poem, it broke my heart. I didn't realize how much weed made you feel like you didn't belong." I wanted to believe them, but years of being sidelined don't vanish with a few words. "You didn't just leave me out of the retreat," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "You've been leaving me out my whole life. Every time you chose work, or your friends, or your own plans over me. I'm your daughter, not an inconvenience." The words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Mom flinched, and Dad's shoulders sagged. "We know," Mom said, her voice breaking. "And we want to do better. We want to be better." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back, not ready for that yet. "How do I know you mean it?" I asked. "How do I know this isn't just you feeling bad because I called you out?" Dad looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "You don't. Not yet. But we're asking for a chance to show you. To listen. To make space for you." It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and for the first time, I saw something in their eyes that looked like real regret, not just for this weekend, but for all of it. I didn't forgive them that night. I didn't fall into their arms or pretend everything was okay. Instead, I nodded, my jaw tight. "Okay, show me. But it's going to take more than words." I turned and left, the cool night air hitting my face as I stepped outside. My chest felt lighter, but the ache was still there. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. The next morning, as families loaded their cars, I said goodbye to the teen crew. Marcus hugged me, promising to visit if he was ever in Chicago. Priya slipped me a note with her number, whispering, "You're a badass, Ellie. Don't forget it." I laughed, tucking the note into my pocket. Miss Clara pulled me aside, handing me a small pinecone keychain. "For the girl who made her own space," she said, her eyes twinkling. I hugged her, grateful for this place and these people who'd helped me find my voice. My parents were waiting by the van, their faces hopeful but cautious. I climbed into the back seat, my backpack at my feet, and we drove home in near silence. They tried to make small talk, but I kept my answers short, my eyes on the passing trees. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about protecting myself until they proved they'd changed. Back in Chicago, life didn't magically fix itself. Mom and Dad tried. Small things, like asking about my day, sitting down for dinner without their phones, inviting me to movie nights. It was awkward, clumsy even, but it was something. I started writing more, filling my journal with poems and stories, some of which I shared with the teen crew over group chats. Priya's poetry club idea took off, and she invited me to join their virtual readings. I was finding my place, not just with my family, but in a bigger world. But I wasn't done with Pine Haven's lesson. I'd learned that I didn't need permission to take up space, and I wasn't going to let my parents, or anyone, forget it. The retreat had been my stage, but life was my canvas, and I was just getting started. Back home, the air in our house felt different, like a room after someone opens a window. Mom and Dad were trying, but it was like they were learning a new language, one where I wasn't just background noise. They'd ask me about school, about my writing, and for the first time, they seemed to actually listen. But trust is a slow build, and I wasn't ready to let my guard down. I'd spent too many years being the kid they forgot to notice. I threw myself into my routine, school, homework, and late-night chats with the Pine Haven crew. Marcus sent me a playlist of songs he thought I'd like, and Priya kept me updated on her poetry club, which was gaining traction at her school. I even started one at mine, a small group of kids who met in the library to share their words. It wasn't Pine Haven, but it was something, my own corner of the world where I could be seen. One evening, about a week after the retreat, Mom knocked on my door. She held a notebook, her fingers nervous against the cover. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I nodded, sitting on my bed, my journal open in my lap. She sat across from me, the notebook trembling in her hands. "I wrote something," she said. "After your poem. I needed to process it." She handed me the notebook, and I read her words. A letter, not unlike the one I'd written at the retreat. It was messy, raw, full of apologies for the times she'd looked past me, for the moments she'd chosen convenience over connection. She wrote about her own childhood, how her parents had been distant, and how she'd sworn she'd be different, but hadn't known how. It wasn't an excuse, she said, just an explanation. By the time I finished, my eyes were blurry, but I didn't let the tears fall. "Thanks," I said, handing it back. "It means something." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step. Dad was slower to open up, but he started showing up in his own way. He'd leave work early to drive me to poetry club, sitting in the car with a book instead of scrolling his phone. One night, he brought home a pizza and suggested we watch a movie. Just the three of us, no distractions. It was awkward, with long silences and forced laughs, but it was a start. I could see them trying to make space for me, and while it didn't erase the past, it gave me hope for something better. At school, my poetry club became my sanctuary. We were a small group. Me, a quiet kid named Leo who wrote about his dog, and a girl named Aisha who poured her heart into metaphors about the ocean. Our first meeting was shaky, but by the third, we were sharing pieces that made us cry and laugh in the same breath. I read them enough space, and they got it, no explanations needed. Aisha hugged me after, saying, "You're like the glue here, Ellie." It was the first time I'd felt like a leader, not just a follower in someone else's story. But the past wasn't done with me. One night, I found an old photo album in the attic while looking for my winter coat. It was full of pictures from family trips I barely remembered. Me as a toddler, grinning at the camera, Mom and Dad laughing with me. Somewhere along the way, that joy had faded, replaced by distance and excuses. I sat there, surrounded by dusty boxes, and let myself cry for the family we used to be. But I also realized something. I didn't just want to go back. I wanted to build something new. I started leaving my journal open on the kitchen table, a quiet invitation for Mom and Dad to read it. They did, sometimes leaving notes in the margins, small things like, "This is beautiful," or "I'm proud of you." It wasn't perfect, but it was communication, a bridge we were building one word at a time. I wrote about Pine Haven, about the teen crew, about the feeling of standing on that stage and claiming my space. And slowly, they started sharing too. Dad left a post-it about a time he felt invisible at work, and Mom wrote a poem, shaky but honest, about wanting to be a better mom. By October, things were shifting. We started a weekly family night, where we'd cook together or play board games. It was clunky. Dad burned the lasagna once, and Mom got competitive over Monopoly, but it was ours. I still felt the sting of the retreat, of all the times they'd left me out, but I also saw their effort. They were learning, and so was I. One day, Priya called, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Ellie, we're planning a reunion for the Pine Haven volunteers. You in?" My heart leapt. The thought of seeing Marcus, Priya, and the others again felt like coming home. "Hell yeah," I said, laughing. "But only if you promise to perform that dance you did at the talent show." She groaned, but I could hear her smile. I told Mom and Dad about the reunion over dinner. They exchanged a look, then Mom said, "We'd like to come, if that's okay. Not to intrude, just to see what you built there." I hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, but it's my space, okay? Your guests." They smiled, and for the first time, it felt like they understood. The reunion was set for spring, and I spent the winter planning with the crew, writing new poems, and dreaming of what we could create together. Pine Haven had been a turning point, not just for me, but for my family. I'd made them regret leaving me out, not by tearing them down, but by showing them who I was. And now, I was ready to keep taking up space, on my terms, in my way, with a family that was finally learning to make room. Winter in Chicago was brutal, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you question why anyone lives here. But inside our house, things were warming up, slowly, like a fire you have to keep stoking. Mom and Dad were still trying, and I was starting to let them. Family nights became less awkward, with real laughs sneaking in between the silences. One night, Dad even read a poem he'd written. Terrible, but earnest, and we teased him mercilessly until we were all doubled over, the tension melting away. My poetry club was growing too. Leo brought a friend, and Aisha convinced her cousin to join, so we moved from the library to a community center room that smelled faintly of paint and possibility. I was nervous leading the sessions, but every time someone shared a piece that cracked their heart open, I felt it, the same rush I'd felt on the Pine Haven stage. I was making space, not just for myself, but for others, and it was changing me. I kept in touch with the Pine Haven crew through group chats that buzzed with memes, music recommendations, and plans for the spring reunion. Marcus was working on a short film inspired by our talent show, and Priya sent me drafts of her own poems, each one sharper than the last. They were my anchor, a reminder that I'd found a family beyond my own, one that saw me without me having to fight for it. But the past still lingered. One Saturday, while Mom was at the grocery store, Dad sat me down in the living room. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting with a coffee mug. "Ellie, I need to tell you something," he said. "When we said there wasn't space at the retreat, it wasn't just about the camp's rules. We were struggling, your mom and I. Things haven't been great between us for a while." My stomach twisted. I'd sensed the tension, the way they'd sometimes talk past each other, but hearing it out loud was different. "We thought the retreat would help us figure things out," he continued. "We didn't want you caught in the middle, but we were wrong to leave you out. It wasn't fair." His voice cracked, and I saw the weight he'd been carrying, not just guilt about me, but fear of losing the family we had left. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my throat tight. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it made it less black and white. When Mom got home, we talked, all three of us, for the first time in years without a script. They admitted they'd been avoiding the hard conversations, not just with me, but with each other. I told them how their distance had made me feel like I was disappearing, how Pine Haven had been my way of screaming, "I'm here." It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and when we went to bed that night, the house felt a little less heavy. As spring approached, I threw myself into planning the Pine Haven reunion. The teen crew had big ideas, a mini talent show, a group mural, and a bonfire where we'd share news stories. I was nervous about Mom and Dad coming, but I also wanted them to see the world I'd built, the one where I wasn't an afterthought. I sent them the schedule, half expecting them to back out, but they didn't. They even offered to drive, which I accepted, though I made it clear I'd be with my crew most of the time. The reunion was set for a weekend in April, and when we arrived at Pine Haven, the air was crisp with new growth, the pines greener than I remembered. Marcus tackle-hugged me the second I stepped out of the van, and Priya dragged me to see the mural they'd started, a chaotic, colorful mess that somehow felt perfect. Miss Clara was there, too, her gray curls as wild as ever, and she pulled me into a hug. "You're back," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My parents hung back, watching me with the crew, their smiles tentative but real. I introduced them to Marcus and Priya, who were polite but didn't hold back their teasing about my stage takeover. Mom laughed, a little nervously, and Dad nodded like he was trying to keep up. They weren't part of this world, not really, but they were here, and that was something. The talent show was smaller this time, just the teen crew and a few new volunteers. I performed a new poem, one about building bridges instead of burning them, about finding family in unexpected places. The crew backed me up again, their movements softer this time, like a conversation instead of a battle cry. When I finished, the applause was warm, and I saw Mom wiping her eyes, Dad's arm around her. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. That night, by the bonfire, I sat with my crew, my parents a few logs away. They didn't try to join us, but they listened, their faces lit by the flickering flames. Marcus told a story about his little brother, Priya shared a poem about her grandmother, and I read a short piece about the lake, how it held all our reflections, even the ones we didn't want to see. When I looked at my parents, I saw something new, pride, yes, but also understanding. They were starting to get it. The reunion ended with promises to meet again, and as we drove home, Mom reached back from the passenger seat, her hand resting on mine. "We're proud of you, Ellie," she said. Dad nodded, his eyes on the road. "We're learning." I squeezed her hand, just for a moment, then let go. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was enough for now. Back in Chicago, the spring unfolded like a promise kept. Our family nights became a ritual, not just a checkbox. Mom started a journal of her own, leaving it on the counter for me to read, and I'd leave mine for her. Dad joined in, his notes short but honest, and slowly, we were building something new, a family that talked, even when it was hard. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments, still moments when old hurts flared up. But we were trying, and that was more than I'd ever thought possible. My poetry club grew, spilling over into open mic nights at a local coffee shop. Aisha's ocean metaphors turned into a chapbook we self-published, and Leo's dog poems got him a small following online. I was their leader, but more than that, I was their friend, and they were mine. Every time we shared our work, I thought of Pine Haven, of the stage where I'd found my voice, and I carried that strength with me. The Pine Haven crew stayed close. Our group had a lifeline of laughter and support. Marcus sent me a rough cut of his film, a montage of our talent show with my poem as the centerpiece, and I cried watching it, not from sadness, but from the realization that I'd made something real. Priya's poetry club was thriving, and she invited me to guest speak at their first in-person event. I said yes, of course, already planning a new piece for it. One evening in May, Mom and Dad sat me down at the kitchen table. They looked nervous, but not the bad kind, more like they were about to take a leap. "We've been talking," Mom said, her voice steady, "about how we can do better. We want to make sure you always feel like you belong, Ellie. Not just at home, but in everything we do." Dad nodded, pulling out a brochure for a family art workshop. We thought this could be a start. All three of us, together. No one left out. I looked at the brochure, my fingers tracing the colorful images of paintbrushes and canvases. It wasn't Pine Haven, but it was theirs, an offering, a promise. "Okay," I said, smiling. "But I'm picking the colors." They laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were all in the same room, really seeing each other. The workshop was a mess. Dad got paint on his glasses, Mom accidentally mixed every color into mud, and I painted a chaotic abstract that somehow captured everything I'd been through. We hung it in the living room, a reminder of our new start. It wasn't a fix, not completely, but it was a step toward a family where there was always enough space. Looking back, Pine Haven wasn't just a retreat, it was a reckoning. I'd gone there to make my parents regret leaving me out, and I had. But more than that, I'd found my voice, my people, and a strength I didn't know I had. I'd shown them what it meant to sideline me, but I'd also shown them, and myself, that I could build my own space, one where I'd never be invisible again. As summer approached, I started planning my next move. Maybe another camp, maybe a poetry slam, maybe just more nights with my family, laughing over burnt lasagna. Whatever it was, I knew one thing for sure. I was done shrinking. I'd take up space, fill it with my words, my dreams, my heart. And no one, not my parents, not anyone, would ever make me feel like there wasn't enough room for me again.